Chapter 1. The Goodbye That Felt Like a Funeral. Dean Harris stood in the doorway of the bedroom and watched his wife pack like a stranger preparing to vanish. Kirsten moved with sharp, efficient motions, folding clothes without care, tossing them into the suitcase as if nothing in this house was worth handling gently anymore. The zipper screamed every time she tested it, loud in the otherwise suffocating quiet. Outside, the morning sun spilled through the curtains, bright and cruel, lighting up the dust that hovered in the air like things long forgotten. Dean leaned against the doorframe, his arms heavy at his sides, his head buzzing in that familiar way. The fog never fully lifted anymore. It hadn't for years. Sometimes it felt like he was living half a second behind his own life, watching it happen without quite being able to reach out and grab it. "You're staring," Kirsten said without looking at him. "Just making sure you didn't forget anything," Dean replied. She snorted. "Please. I've been packing my own bags since before I married you." That wasn't new. The sharpness, the casual cruelty slipped into conversation like it belonged there. It hadn't always been like this. Once they'd laughed in this room. Once they'd shared a bed that felt warm instead of divided by invisible borders. That life had ended 6 years ago, the day Jordan stopped walking. Dean's eyes drifted past Kirsten to the framed photo on the dresser. Jordan at 8 years old, grinning with grass-stained knees and a missing front tooth, holding up a baseball glove like he just won the World Series. That boy felt like someone else's memory now. Since the accident, the house had slowly turned into a hospital, then into something colder, controlled. Kirsten had taken over everything. Doctors, specialists, medications, schedules pinned to the fridge with color-coded magnets. Dean wasn't asked anymore. He was told. Jordan was no longer their son to her. He was a responsibility, a weight. "Did you refill his morning pills?" she asked, snapping the suitcase shut. "Yes," Dean said automatically. He always said yes. "You didn't change the order, did you?" "No." "You didn't miss anything?" "No." She finally turned to look at him then, her eyes sharp and assessing, like a supervisor evaluating an employee. Satisfied, she nodded once. "Good. Those meds are critical. If you mess with the schedule, everything goes downhill. I don't want to come back to a disaster." Dean swallowed. "He's still your son." Her mouth tightened. "He's a full-time job. Don't get sentimental now." She dragged the suitcase off the bed and rolled it toward the door. As she passed him, he caught a faint whiff of her perfume. Expensive, unfamiliar. Another thing she'd added to her life without asking him. In the hallway, Jordan's bedroom door was cracked open. Dean glanced toward it instinctively. "Don't wake him," Kirsten said sharply. "He needs his rest." "He's already awake," Dean replied quietly. "He usually is by now." She hesitated, then waved it off. "Then don't get him excited. You know how fragile he is." "Fragile." Dean clenched his jaw. Jordan had survived surgeries, months of pain, endless physical therapy that led nowhere. Fragile wasn't the word Dean would have chosen, but he learned not to argue. Every disagreement turned into an interrogation, then into silence that lasted days. At the front door, Kirsten slipped on her sunglasses and checked her phone. "My mother will call to make sure you're following instructions," she said. "Answer when she does." Of course she would. "And Dean," she paused, hand on the door. "Don't touch my coffee pods. Yours are on the left. I don't want to come home to find them gone." Dean nodded again, always nodding. She opened the door, sunlight flooding the entryway. For a moment, she stood there, framed by brightness, like someone leaving a scene she had already emotionally abandoned. "I'll be back in 2 weeks," she said. "Try not to screw things up." Then she was gone. The door shut with a soft click that felt louder than any slam. Dean stood there long after he heard her heels fade down the steps. Through the front window, he watched her load the suitcase into the trunk, watched her check her reflection in the car mirror, watched her pull out of the driveway without looking back. The engine disappeared down the street. So did the tension. Or at least, it loosened enough for him to breathe. The house settled into silence, the heavy, oppressive kind that pressed against his ears. No commands, no reminders, no sharp voice cutting through every thought. Just emptiness. Dean walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter. His hand shook slightly as he reached for the coffee maker. Morning routines were all that anchored him now. He poured the grounds, filled a reservoir, pressed the button. The machine hummed to life, familiar and comforting. He stared at the calendar on the wall. 2 weeks. He told himself that was manageable. He'd done it before. He always did. Still, a strange feeling crawled up his spine, like the house itself had been holding its breath and had finally exhaled. The coffee finished brewing. Dean poured himself a cup, steam rising in lazy curls. The smell filled the kitchen, rich and bitter. He wrapped his hands around the mug, welcoming the warmth. His head felt heavy. It always did in the mornings. He took a slow sip and closed his eyes. For a moment, there was nothing but the low hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock. Then footsteps, not the mechanical creak of the house settling, not the soft roll of Jordan's wheelchair. Footsteps coming from the stairs. Chapter 2, The Impossible Happens. The sound came again. Footsteps. Dean frowned, the coffee mug halfway to his lips. For a split second, his tired mind tried to rationalize it. Old pipes, wood settling, some half-dream bleeding into reality. But this was wrong. This was rhythm. Wait. Direction. Someone was walking. His heart thudded once, hard, as he slowly turned toward the staircase. The mug slipped from his fingers. Coffee exploded across the tile, scalding his bare feet, the ceramic shattering as it hit the floor, but Dean didn't feel any of it. His brain refused to process what his eyes were seeing. Jordan was standing at the top of the stairs, not slumped in his wheelchair, not braced against the railing during physical therapy. Standing, upright, balanced. His hands rested lightly at his sides, fingers trembling, legs straight beneath him like they had always belonged there. He took a step down, then another. Dean's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Jordan reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped. His face was pale, eyes wide and sharp with something Dean had never seen in them before. Fear mixed with urgency, layered over an intelligence that felt suddenly too old for his 13-year-old face. "Dad," Jordan whispered. Dean shook his head weakly. No, this isn't funny. If this is some kind of dream, we don't have time." Jordan cut in, his voice shaking but firm. He stepped closer, lowering his voice even further. "Dad, we need to leave this house now." Dean laughed once, a short, broken sound. "Jordan, you're—" He gestured helplessly at his son's legs. "You can't." Jordan grabbed his wrist. The strength in that grip froze Dean where he stood. "Listen to me," Jordan said, eyes locked onto his. "Right now, don't ask questions. Don't shout. Don't call anyone. We leave. Now." Dean's heart slammed against his ribs. "Jordan, your legs later," Jordan whispered fiercely. "Please, trust me. Trust him." The word hit Dean harder than anything else. A loud engine noise cut through the air outside. Jordan's head snapped toward the front window. "Garage," he said. "Go." Dean's instincts finally broke through the shock. He grabbed his keys from the counter, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped them. Jordan was already moving, fast, too fast. Not limping, not stiff. He sprinted down the hallway like a kid late for the school bus. Dean stumbled after him. "Slow down. You're going to fall." Jordan didn't slow. As Dean yanked open the door to the garage, a deep rumble echoed from outside. Tires on gravel. A vehicle heavier than a sedan. Jordan skidded to a stop just long enough to glance through the garage window. "Dad," he hissed. "They're here." "Who?" Dean demanded, panic rising. "Jordan, what are you talking about?" "A van," Jordan said. "Black. No plates." Dean's stomach dropped. The garage door rattled as Jordan slammed the button to open it. The motor groaned, lifting slowly, too slowly. Through the widening gap, Dean saw the front of the van as it rolled into the driveway, blocking half the exit. The side door slid open. 2 men stepped out, both dressed in dark clothes, both wearing masks that hid their faces completely. Dean felt the blood drain from his face. "Oh God," he whispered. One of the men looked directly toward the garage. "Dad!" Jordan shouted. "Start the car." Dean lunged for the driver's seat, nearly tripping over his own feet. His hands fumbled with the door handle. He threw himself inside, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine coughed once. Outside, the men began moving faster. Come on, Dean muttered. The engine roared to life. Jordan dove into the passenger seat and slammed the door shut, just as one of the masked men broke into a run. The other reached into his jacket. Drive! Jordan screamed. Dean slammed his foot on the gas. The car shot backward, tires squealing as they clipped the edge of the garage door. The side mirror cracked against the frame, glass exploding inward. Dean barely noticed. The car fishtailed into the driveway. One of the men lunged forward, slapping his hand against the trunk as the car sped past him. Holy! Dean swerved hard, barely missing the mailbox as he shot down the street. In the rearview mirror, he saw the van jerk forward, then stop. The men shouted at each other, their voices muffled by distance. Dean didn't slow down. He didn't breathe. He didn't speak. The houses blurred past as his mind fractured into pieces that refused to fit together. Jordan was sitting beside him, breathing hard, alive, upright. The wheelchair was still in the garage. The coffee was spilled on the kitchen floor. Masked men had just tried to get to them. What? Dean's voice cracked. What the hell is happening? Jordan didn't answer immediately. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, hands gripping his knees so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Jordan, Dean said louder. Talk to me. Jordan finally turned to him, eyes shining with unshed tears. I'm sorry, he whispered. I wanted to tell you sooner. I just couldn't. Not until she left. She? Dean echoed, though he already knew the answer. Jordan swallowed. Mom. The word felt wrong in his mouth now. Dean's hands tightened on the steering wheel. You're telling me my wife sent those men? Jordan shook his head slightly. Not yet, but she would have. Dean laughed again, this time edged with hysteria. You're 13 years old. You were in a wheelchair yesterday. Jordan's voice broke. I know, and I'm sorry, but if we stayed, we wouldn't be alive. Dean's vision blurred. He blinked hard, forcing tears back so he could see the road. Jordan, he said quietly. You were standing. Jordan nodded once. You ran, Dean whispered. Another nod. Dean's chest felt too tight. His world, the rules of it, the reality he'd accepted, had just shattered. Nothing made sense. Everything felt dangerous. In the mirror, the van was gone, but the fear wasn't. Dean pressed harder on the gas, heart pounding, mind spiraling, his life collapsing into confusion, terror, and disbelief. Chapter 3, 4 Years of Silence. The road stretched ahead of them in a gray blur, the tires humming against the asphalt like a steady warning. Dean didn't know where he was driving. He only knew he couldn't stop. His hands were locked around the steering wheel so tightly his fingers ached, knuckles white, wrists stiff. Jordan sat rigid in the passenger seat, staring out the windshield. His breathing was uneven now, the adrenaline bleeding off, leaving something raw underneath. Jordan, Dean said again, softer this time. You have to talk to me. Please. Jordan swallowed. His throat bobbed. I will. Just let me do it my way. Dean nodded, though his head felt too heavy to hold up. His heart was still racing, his thoughts colliding into each other. Every few seconds, his eyes flicked to Jordan's legs, half expecting them to vanish, to revert back to the fragile lie he'd lived with for 6 years. They didn't. Jordan shifted in his seat, then winced slightly. Does it hurt? Dean asked immediately. A little, Jordan admitted. It always does at first. At first. Dean's stomach twisted. At first what? Jordan let out a slow breath. When I move too much. When I haven't in a while. Dean shook his head, a hollow sound escaping his throat. You're talking like this is normal. It used to be, Jordan said quietly. They drove in silence for another mile. Dean's pulse slowly began to match the rhythm of the road. He needed answers. He needed something solid to grab onto before his mind completely unraveled. You said you were recovering, Dean finally said. When? Jordan's fingers curled into the fabric of his jeans. About 4 years ago. Dean almost missed a turn. 4. His voice cracked. Jordan, you're 9. I know. You were in that wheelchair, Dean said louder now. Every day. I carried you. I watched you cry when therapy didn't work. I watched you. I let you. Jordan interrupted softly. The words hit like a slap. Dean's chest tightened. Why? Jordan closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were glassy. Because the first time I stood up, Mom saw me. Dean's grip tightened on the wheel. What happened? She smiled, Jordan said. Not like a happy smile. Like she'd figured something out. That night, my pills changed. Dean frowned. Change how? There were more of them, Jordan replied. Different colors. New bottles. She said the doctor adjusted my dosage because my condition was worsening. Dean's head throbbed. Didn't the doctor? She handled all of that, Jordan said. Always did. Remember? She said it was easier if one parent took control. Dean remembered. He remembered being relieved. Exhausted. Grateful not to argue anymore. I started feeling worse, Jordan continued. Dizzy. Weak. My legs felt like they were filled with sand. I'd stand when no one was around, just to check, and then I couldn't anymore. Dean's jaw clenched. You thought you were relapsing. I thought I was broken, Jordan whispered. Again, Dean's eyes burned. But then I noticed something, Jordan said. When I skipped a dose, even by accident, I felt clearer, stronger, less sick. Dean's heart stuttered. You skip your meds? At first, I didn't mean to, Jordan said. I pretend to swallow them and hide them under my tongue. Just once, just to see. And my legs stopped shaking, Jordan said. My head stopped buzzing. I could think again. Dean felt nauseous. So I started testing it, Jordan went on. I hid pills, flushed them, traded them out. And every time I didn't take them, I got better. Dean's voice was barely audible. Jesus Christ. Jordan's shoulders trembled. That's when I realized it wasn't an accident. Dean glanced at him sharply. You're saying she was poisoning me, Jordan said flatly. The word hung between them, heavy and final. Dean shook his head, denial clawing its way up. No, she's controlling. She's cold. But poisoning? She wouldn't. She would, Jordan said. And she did. Dean swallowed hard. His stomach churned. How do you know? Jordan turned to him then, eyes fierce despite the tears. Because I stopped pretending for one day. Dean's breath caught. What happened? She panicked, Jordan said. She yelled. She dragged me back into the chair herself. She doubled my dosage that night. And the next morning, I couldn't stand it all. Dean's vision blurred. He blinked rapidly, gripping the wheel as memories flooded back. Jordan vomiting. Jordan fainting. Kirsten insisting it was part of the process. So, I learned, Jordan said. I learned to lie. Dean's chest ached. 4 years, I watched, Jordan continued. I listened. I remembered everything. I pretended to be weak so I could stay alive. Dean's mind reeled. But why not tell me? Jordan's voice cracked. Because you were sick too. Dean froze. What? Jordan looked down at his hands. You didn't notice, did you? How tired you always were. How you forgot things. How you stopped arguing. Dean's mouth went dry. The coffee, Jordan whispered. She makes it for you every morning. Same cup, same routine. Dean felt ice spread through his veins. He remembered the headaches, the fog, the way his thoughts felt dull, like he was underwater. She's been poisoning you too, Jordan said. Not enough to kill you, just enough to keep you tired. Compliant. Dean's chest heaved. No, I checked, Jordan said. When I started hiding my pills, I started hiding yours too. I tested them. Dean didn't ask how. He didn't think he could handle the answer. There's more, Jordan said quietly. Dean swallowed. Of course there is. Jordan hesitated. Mom was married before you. Dean nodded slowly. I know. Did you know how he died? Jordan asked. Car accident, Dean said. That's what she told me. Jordan's jaw tightened. Insurance payout. Big one. Dean's heart pounded. Jordan, his name was Paul Costello, Jordan said. And it wasn't an accident. Dean's hands began to shake. She did the same thing, Jordan said. Controlled his meds, his schedule, his food. And when he was weak enough, she collected. Dean stared at the road, the lines blurring. You're saying she married me because you were insured, Jordan finished softly. Because you were stable. Because you trusted her. The silence that followed was deafening. Dean's entire body felt hollow, like something vital had been scooped out of him. Every memory replayed in a new light. Every argument he lost, every time he backed down, every moment he felt too tired to fight. None of it had been natural. None of it had been his fault. Dean realized, with a sickening clarity, that his exhaustion, his confusion, his submission hadn't been weakness at all. They had been engineered. Chapter 4. The Storage Unit of Truth. Dean didn't realize how far they'd driven until the road narrowed into cracked concrete and weeds began swallowing the shoulders. The city had fallen away mile by mile, replaced by empty lots, rusted fences, and long stretches of nothing. The sky hung low and colorless, like it was holding its breath. Jordan finally spoke up. "Slow down. It's the next turn." Dean eased off the gas and followed Jordan's directions down a service road barely wide enough for one car. A chain-link fence appeared on the left, stretching endlessly, broken only by a sagging gate and a faded sign that read storage in peeling red letters. "This place?" Dean asked, disbelief creeping into his voice. Jordan nodded. "Yeah." Dean pulled in and cut the engine. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the ticking of the cooling hood. Rows of storage units stretched out in neat lines, metal doors painted dull gray, most streaked with rust. It smelled like oil, dust, and old rain. Dean turned to Jordan. "How do you even know about this?" Jordan unbuckled his seatbelt. "I'll show you." They stepped out of the car. Dean's legs felt unsteady as he followed his son down the narrow aisle between units. Each step felt surreal. Just hours ago, Jordan had been someone Dean lifted, pushed, protected. Now he walked with purpose, keys already in his hand. Unit 317. Jordan stopped in front of it and glanced around, scanning the empty lot. "No one followed us," he said, more to himself than to Dean. Dean swallowed. "Jordan, what is this place?" Jordan didn't answer. He knelt, slid a key into the padlock, and twisted. The lock popped open with a dull clank. He stood, took a breath, and rolled up the metal door. The sound echoed down the row. Dean froze. Inside wasn't boxes or furniture or forgotten junk. It was a room, organized, deliberate, alive with intention. Fluorescent lights flickered on as Jordan flipped a switch, illuminating walls completely covered in paper. Photos, names, dates, lines drawn and marker-connected faces like veins. Newspaper clippings overlapped medical reports. Insurance policies were pinned beside death certificates. A large whiteboard dominated one wall, filled with timelines stretching back decades. "What the hell?" Dean whispered. Jordan stepped inside, his movements careful, almost reverent. "This is everything." Dean walked in slowly, his eyes darting from wall to wall. On a folding table sat 3 laptops, their screens dark, but cables neatly coiled beside them. Hard drives were labeled and stacked like library books. A shelf held dozens of pill bottles, each sealed in plastic bags with handwritten notes taped to them. Dean's knees felt weak. "This isn't real," he said. "This can't be real." Jordan turned to him. "It is." Dean reached out and touched a photograph pinned near the center of the wall. A smiling man stood beside Kirsten, her arm looped through his. The caption beneath read, "Paul Costello deceased." "That's him," Dean said hoarsely. "Her first husband." Jordan nodded. "That's where it started." Dean dragged a hand down his face. "Jordan, how long has this been here?" Jordan hesitated, then answered quietly. "Longer than you think." Dean looked at him sharply. "What does that mean?" Jordan walked to a corner where a small desk sat, its surface covered in notebooks. He picked one up and handed it to Dean. The handwriting inside was neat, cramped, unmistakably a child's. Dates from years ago filled the pages. Observations, schedules, names. Dean's chest tightened. "You wrote this?" "I started when I was 8, Jordan said. Dean stared at him. 8? Jordan nodded. "That was when I realized something was wrong with Mom. Not just with me. With everything." Dean felt sick. "Jordan, you were a kid." "I know," Jordan said. "That's why no one suspected me." Dean looked back at the walls, his mind racing. "But how did you even get this unit?" Jordan took a breath. "Paul Costello rented it." Dean turned slowly. "What?" "I found the paperwork," Jordan said. "Old male Mom never bothered to throw away. When he died, she stopped paying for it. The lock changed. I memorized the number anyway." Dean's head spun. "So how? When I got old enough, I came back," Jordan said. "I saved birthday money. I paid cash. I copied the lease. No names. Dean staggered back against the wall, the cold metal grounding him. You've been doing this alone? Jordan's voice softened. I wasn't alone. I had time. Dean's eyes burned. You were pretending to be helpless. Jordan nodded. So they'd keep talking around me. So they'd keep slipping up. Dean looked at the whiteboard again. Names he didn't recognize filled the list. Men, mostly. Dates of death circled in red. Beneath them, words like fall, overdose, cardiac arrest. How many? Dean asked. Jordan swallowed. At least 12. Maybe more. Over 30 years. Dean's stomach dropped. Jesus. Jordan walked to a shelf and picked up a small recorder. These are calls. Arguments. Planning. I hid microphones. I labeled everything. Dean felt his hands shaking. This is a police station. Jordan shook his head. It's an investigation. Dean turned to him sharply. No, this is dangerous. This is too much for a kid. Jordan met his gaze, eyes steady. I didn't have a choice. Dean's throat closed. Why didn't you tell anyone? The police? A teacher? Jordan's mouth twisted. Who would believe a paralyzed kid accusing his own mother? Especially when she controlled the doctors? Dean had no answer. He stepped closer to the wall and studied a family tree sketched in black marker. Names branched out, some circled, some crossed through. This isn't just her, Dean said slowly. No, Jordan replied. It never was. Dean's chest tightened as the scope of it hit him. This is a system. Jordan nodded. A family business. Dean sank onto a folding chair, his legs finally giving out. He stared at the evidence, at the years of quiet work, at the childhood that had been sacrificed piece by piece. You built all this, Dean whispered, while we thought you couldn't even stand. Jordan's voice broke. I had to be invisible. Dean closed his eyes, tears spilling over. When he opened them, he looked at his son, not the fragile child he'd been protecting, but the survivor standing in front of him. From the age of 8, Jordan had observed, recorded, copied, and learned, pretending to be helpless while building a case strong enough to destroy everyone involved. Chapter 5. The Men Who Clean Up Death. The sound came first, low, deliberate, unmistakable. An engine. Jordan froze mid-sentence, one hand hovering over a hard drive. Dean felt it too, the vibration crawling up through the concrete floor, through the folding chair, into his bones. Jordan's eyes flicked to the narrow window near the ceiling. Dean stood. That's not normal traffic, Jordan finished quietly. I know. They listened. The engine cut. Doors opened. Not slammed. Controlled. Heavy footsteps followed, measured and unhurried. The kind of walk that belonged to men who weren't in a rush because they didn't expect resistance. Dean's pulse spiked. Jordan, what's happening? Jordan didn't answer right away. He crossed to the whiteboard and reached behind it, fingers pressing a hidden latch. A panel slid open with a soft click, revealing a small monitor. Grainy security footage flickered to life. Two figures moved between the rows of storage units. Both wore dark jackets. Both had their faces covered. Dean felt his throat close. It's them. Jordan nodded once. Yeah. One of the men stopped directly in front of Unit 317. He looked up at the security camera mounted on the pole overhead, then reached up and twisted it aside with casual confidence. Dean's breath came fast. They know. They always know, Jordan said calmly. The other man circled the unit, testing the padlock with a gloved hand. Who are they? Dean whispered. Jordan's voice was flat. The ones who clean up death. A loud metallic clang echoed as the lock was struck with something heavy. Dean jumped. Jordan, Dad, Jordan said, steady and precise. Do exactly what I say. Another strike. The metal shrieked. They're not here to talk, Dean said. No, Jordan replied. They're here to erase. Jordan moved fast, controlled, practiced. He shut down laptops with quick keystrokes, unplugged 2 hard drives, and slid them into a backpack already waiting by the door. Dean stared. You planned for this. Jordan didn't look at him. Paul did. A third blow hit the lock. Help me, Jordan said. Dean rushed forward, grabbing the other bag Jordan shoved at him. What do I? Follow me, Jordan said. And don't panic. That's a little late, Dean snapped. Jordan shot him a look, Not angry, just focused. Trust me. The metal door rattled violently now. Jordan crossed to the back wall and knelt, pressing a loose panel inward. It swung open to reveal a dark opening barely wide enough for a person. Dean stared. You're kidding. Jordan grabbed a flashlight. Ventilation shaft. Paul installed it when he realized he might need a way out. A loud crack echoed as the padlock finally gave way. Dean's heart hammered. Jordan, they're getting in. Jordan climbed into the opening without hesitation. Then moved. Dean dropped to his knees and followed, scraping his elbows as he squeezed through. The air inside was stale and tight. Metal pressed against his shoulders as he crawled, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly ahead of them. Behind them, the storage unit door screeched open. Clear, a muffled voice shouted. Dean's chest tightened. They're inside. Keep going, Jordan said. No talking. They crawled in silence, the sound of their breathing loud in the confined space. Dean's muscles screamed as the shaft angled downward. He nearly lost his grip when a loud thud echoed behind them, something heavy hitting the floor. They'll find the opening, Dean whispered. Jordan didn't answer. The shaft ended abruptly at a rusted grate. Jordan kicked it open and dropped down onto gravel. Dean followed, landing hard, pain shooting through his knees. They were outside, behind a row of dumpsters. The storage facility fence loomed ahead, a small gap cut cleanly at the bottom. Jordan ran. Dean ran after him, lungs burning, adrenaline drowning out every ache. They ducked through the fence and sprinted across an empty lot toward an alley. A car sat parked beneath a flickering streetlight. Dean skidded to a stop. That's not ours. Jordan yanked open the driver's door. It is. Dean stared. What? Paul's, Jordan said. He kept it off the books. Jordan tossed Dean the backpack and slid behind the wheel. The engine started instantly, smooth and quiet. Dean jumped into the passenger seat, just as shouts echoed from the storage facility behind them. The car pulled away, blending into the street before anyone could round the corner. Dean slumped back, chest heaving, hands shaking uncontrollably. Oh my God, he breathed. Oh my God. Jordan drove with both hands on the wheel, eyes scanning every intersection. He didn't slow until they were several blocks away. Dean turned to him. You knew they'd come. Jordan nodded. I triggered an alert when I accessed certain files. Dean's stomach dropped. So this was a trap? No, Jordan said. It was a test. I just didn't expect them this fast. Dean rubbed his face. You said their names. Jordan glanced at him. Vince Humphrey and Randall Piper. Dean swallowed. You know them. I know their patterns, Jordan replied. They don't kill. They clean. They stage. Fires, crashes, overdoses. They make it look like bad luck. Dean stared out the window, nausea rising. And they were going to do that to us. Jordan nodded once. Tonight. Dean snapped his head toward him. Tonight. They think we're still home, Jordan said. Sedated. Following Mom's instructions. Dean's blood ran cold. Sedated with what? The same thing she's been giving you, Jordan replied quietly. Dean closed his eyes. Images flashed, coffee mugs, pills, the fog. And then what? Jordan's voice was steady, almost clinical. Then the house burns down. Dean felt something inside him crack. With us inside, Jordan finished. Silence filled the car. Dean stared ahead, his reflection faint in the windshield. His home, his life, reduced to ash to close a file, to collect a payout, to move on. They were never supposed to come back, Dean whispered. We were supposed to disappear. Jordan nodded. That's how it always ends. Dean clenched his fists, anger finally breaking through the fear. Not this time. Jordan didn't respond. He kept driving, eyes fixed on the road, carrying the weight of plans made far too young. Behind them, the storage facility faded into the distance. Ahead of them, the night waited. Jordan explains the killers believe Dean and Jordan are home, sedated, following Kirsten's instructions. Tonight, the house will burn down with them inside. Chapter 6, Let It Burn. The motel sat hunched beside the highway like it had given up trying to be noticed. One flickering neon sign. Two vending machines that hummed louder than the traffic. The kind of place people stayed when they didn't want their names remembered. Dean parked under a dead light and killed the engine. For a long moment, Neither of them moved. You sure this place is clean? Dean asked, his voice hoarse. Jordan nodded. I checked the cameras outside. Analog system. No digital feeds. No license plate scanners. Dean stared at him. You talk like someone who's done this before. Jordan didn't answer. He opened the door and stepped out, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off tension that had been building for years. Inside, the room smelled like disinfectant and old carpet. 2 beds, a small desk, curtains permanently stained yellow by cigarette smoke. Dean locked the door behind them and flipped the deadbolt, then the chain, then stood there like he might physically hold the door shut if he had to. Jordan was already setting up. He pulled the backpack onto the desk, unzipped it, and began laying things out with precision: laptop, external drives, cables, a small black device Dean didn't recognize. Jordan, Dean said quietly, slow down. Jordan paused, then looked up. His face was pale, eyes rimmed red, but his hands were steady. This is the safest place we can be right now, he said. For the next few hours. Dean rubbed his temples. Hours until what? Jordan didn't respond immediately. He plugged in a laptop, powered it on, and waited for the screen to light up. Jordan, we let it happen, Jordan said. Dean froze. Let what happen? Jordan finally met his eyes. The fire. Dean felt like the floor shifted under his feet. No, absolutely not. We called the police. We warned someone. If we stop it, Jordan interrupted, his voice tight but controlled. They disappear. The money vanishes. The evidence gets buried. And Mom walks away. Dean shook his head violently. You're talking about our house. I know. Our photos. Your room. Everything your life was, I know. Jordan repeated, louder this time. And I need you to listen to me. Dean fell onto the edge of the bed, his knees weak. You're asking me to watch our home burn. I'm asking you to let them commit the crime, Jordan said. On camera. In real time. He turned the laptop toward Dean. The screen split into multiple windows. Dean's breath caught. The living room. The kitchen. The hallway. Jordan's bedroom. Live feeds. Those are, Dean whispered. Hidden cameras, Jordan said. I installed them over the years. Smoke detectors. Outlet covers. Motion sensors. They all stream to a private server. Dean stared at the images, his stomach churning. You've been watching us? I've been watching her, Jordan replied quietly. Dean swallowed. You said you hacked her phone. And her mother's, Jordan said, and their private server. Dean looked at him sharply. Their what? Jordan's fingers flew across the keyboard. Lines of code scrolled faster than Dean could follow. They don't keep everything on personal devices, Jordan said. They use an encrypted family server. Off-site. Shared access. The screen changed again. Folders appeared. Dates. Names. Dean's heart pounded. That's everything, Jordan said. Dean leaned closer as Jordan clicked through files. Bank transfers. Insurance policies. Voice recordings labeled with timestamps. I couldn't access it before, Jordan continued. Too many layers. But when Mom left for the trip, she logged in from the airport. Same password she always uses. Dean's jaw tightened. She never learns. She never had to, Jordan said. Dean looked back at the camera feed. The house was quiet. Still, exactly as they'd left it that morning. They think we're there, Dean said. Yes. Asleep. Yes. Dean closed his eyes. The idea of strangers walking through his home, touching his walls, his furniture, his memories, made his skin crawl. Jordan's voice softened. Dad, if we intervene, it becomes attempted arson. They'll claim they were hired for surveillance. They'll walk. Dean opened his eyes. And if we don't? Jordan turned the laptop back to him. They burn it down, he said, with us supposedly inside. Dean felt sick. Murder. Insurance fraud, Jordan added. Conspiracy. Destruction of evidence. Dean exhaled shakily. And we just watch. Jordan nodded. We record. The screen flickered. Movement. Dean's heart jumped. Someone's there. 2 figures appeared on the front porch. Even through grainy night vision, Dean recognized the posture. The confidence. The lack of hesitation. Vincent Piper, Jordan said quietly. Dean clenched his fists. They're early. Jordan checked the time. They adjusted. The front door opened. Dean watched as the men stepped inside his living room like they owned it. One of them glanced around, checking corners. The other pulled something from his jacket. "God," Dean whispered. "They're checking for cameras," Jordan said. "They won't find them." Dean felt his heart pounding in his throat. "How can you be so calm?" Jordan didn't look away from the screen. "Because if I panic now, everything we've built collapses." The men moved through the house with methodical precision. One went upstairs. The other headed for the kitchen. "That's our table," Dean murmured. "That's where we ate dinner last night." Jordan swallowed hard but said nothing. On screen, a device was placed near the couch. Another under the stairs. Small, efficient, deadly. Dean stood abruptly. "I can't do this." Jordan grabbed his arm. "Dad." Dean's voice broke. "I can't watch them destroy our life." Jordan looked up at him, eyes shining. "They already tried to destroy us." Dean froze. Jordan's grip tightened. This is how he stopped them. Dean sank back down, trembling. On the screen, the men finished their work. One of them checked his watch. The other nodded. They exited the house without a second glance. Dean stared at the empty rooms. "That's it," he whispered. "For the fire," Jordan said. "Yes." He turned back to the laptop and began typing again, faster now, urgency bleeding into his movements. "What are you doing?" Dean asked. "Going deeper," Jordan said. "Now that they've committed, the server's defenses are dropping." The folders multiplied. Names filled the screen. Faces. Dates. Dean's breath caught. "There are so many." 17, Jordan said quietly. "Confirmed." Dean's chest tightened. 17 people? 17 victims, Jordan corrected. Over 30 years. Financial spreadsheets appeared, millions transferred through shell accounts. Audio files played in short bursts, voices planning, laughing, discussing cleanup. Dean covered his mouth. "This isn't just Mom," he whispered. Jordan shook his head. "It never was." He clicked one final folder. A web of names spread across the screen. Relatives, enforcers, accountants, doctors. Dean stared at it, horror settling deep in his bones. This wasn't just one family. It was a network. Chapter 7, The Fire Starts Early. The clock on the motel nightstand clicked from 11.17 to 11.18. Dean hadn't realized he was staring at it until Jordan spoke. "Dad," there was something wrong in his voice. Dean looked up from the laptop. "What?" Jordan's fingers hovered frozen above the keyboard. His eyes were locked on the live feed from the living room camera. "It's too early," Jordan said. Dean followed his gaze. For a second, he didn't understand what he was seeing, just a flicker of light where there shouldn't have been one. Then the image sharpened, and reality slammed into him. Flames. Not smoke. Not a spark. Flames licking up the edge of the couch, crawling across the rug like something alive. Dean shot to his feet. "No, no, no, no." Jordan didn't move. "That's not." Dean's voice cracked. "It's not midnight." Jordan's face had gone pale. They changed the schedule. On the screen, the fire spread with terrifying speed. The accelerant did its job. Curtains caught. The wooden coffee table ignited in a bright, violent flash. Smoke rolled across the ceiling, thick and black. Dean's chest tightened until it hurt. They said midnight. Jordan swallowed hard. "I know." Dean turned to him. "You said we had time." Jordan's jaw clenched. "We did. That's why this—" He shook his head once, sharp. "This is a message." "A message," Dean shouted. "They're burning our house. They're reminding us who's in control," Jordan said quietly. The camera feed from the hallway flickered as heat distorted the image. Smoke poured past Jordan's bedroom door on screen. Dean staggered back, as if the flames could reach him through the laptop. "My God, everything's in there." Jordan's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. The fire alarm began to scream through the speakers, shrill and useless. The sound filled the motel room, bouncing off stained walls, drilling into Dean's skull. Dean slapped the laptop shut halfway, then stopped himself and opened it again. Why would they do it early? Jordan's fingers trembled as they finally moved, switching between camera feeds. Because they realized something was off. Dean felt dizzy. What kind of something? Jordan's voice was barely audible. A still being alive. The upstairs feed cut out. Dean sucked in a breath. Jordan. Jordan stared at the dark screen. They weren't supposed to rush. They always wait. Always follow the script. The fire surged in the kitchen now, flames erupting along the cabinets. The feed crackled, then steadied. Dean's legs gave out. He sat heavily on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. This is my fault. I should have stopped it. No, Jordan said sharply. If you had, we'd have nothing. Dean looked up at him. We're losing everything. Jordan opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Something shifted behind his eyes. No, he whispered. Dean frowned. What? Jordan's breath quickened. No. Dean stood again. Jordan, talk to me. Jordan turned toward the dark window, then back to the laptop, panic finally breaking through his composure. There's something still there. Dean's heart sank. What do you mean? My room, Jordan said. In the wall. Dean's pulse spiked. What's in the wall? Jordan's voice shook. The safe. Dean felt cold all over. The safe. Jordan nodded. Fireproof. Hidden behind the panel near my bed. I never moved it because it couldn't be replaced. Dean stared at him. What's inside? Jordan swallowed. Original documents. Hard copies. Handwritten notes. Paul's. Dean's breath caught. You're Paul. Yes, Jordan said urgently. Insurance policies with original signatures. Medical records that were altered digitally later. Paper trails they couldn't erase. Dean felt his stomach drop. You didn't scan them? I couldn't, Jordan said. Some of the ink reacts to heat scanners. Some of the documents are layered. Originals matter. On the laptop, Jordan's bedroom camera came back online for a moment. Smoke poured through the doorway. Dean felt his vision blur. Jordan, if those burn, Jordan said, his voice breaking, some of the proof dies forever. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Dean looked back at the screen, at the room where he'd tucked Jordan in every night for years, where he'd adjusted blankets and whispered promises he hadn't known were lies. How long? Dean asked hoarsely. What? Jordan whispered. How long until it reaches your room? Jordan checked the thermal overlay, his hands shaking now. Minutes. Dean didn't think. He just moved. He grabbed his jacket from the chair. Jordan looked up sharply. What are you doing? Dean's voice was steady, even as his heart thundered. Getting my keys. Jordan jumped to his feet. No, Dad, you can't. I can't, Dean said. That house is already compromised, Jordan said desperately. The floor could collapse. The roof, I know, Dean said. Jordan's eyes filled with tears. You'll die. Dean crossed the room and took his son's face in his hands. Listen to me. Jordan shook his head. I can't lose you too. Dean pressed his forehead to Jordan's. You won't. You don't know that. I do, Dean said quietly. Because I won't let them take this from you. Jordan's breath hitched. Dad, please, I spent 6 years thinking I failed you, Dean said. Thinking I wasn't strong enough, smart enough, present enough. Dean pulled back and really looked at him, standing alive, terrified. I was wrong, Dean continued. But I'm not wrong about this. Jordan's voice broke. You don't have to do this. Yes, Dean said. I do. The fire alarm shrieked through the laptop again. Another camera feed cut to static. Dean turned toward the door. Jordan grabbed his arm. Dad. Dean paused. If you go, Jordan said softly, you might not come back. Dean met his son's eyes and gave a small, sad smile. Then make sure it meant something. Jordan's grip loosened, his shoulders shaking. Dean opened the door, heat and smoke already filling his imagination. Dean makes the choice no parent should have to make. He's going back. Chapter 8, Running into Hell. Dean's boots pounded against the asphalt, each step carrying a weight he could barely comprehend. The night air cut at his lungs, but he barely noticed. His eyes were locked on the fiery glow in the distance. Smoke twisted into the sky like black fingers clawing, demanding attention. The house, his home, engulfed. Dean's chest heaved as he reached the driveway. Flames licked the siding, devouring the wooden frame with a fury he had never imagined. Windows shattered, releasing bursts of fire that danced over the yard. The acrid smell of burning fabric and plastic hit him full force. He coughed violently, tears streaming down his soot-streaked face. Oh God, Jordan, he whispered, voice trembling. From the motel, he had watched, helpless, as Vince and Piper executed their instructions. But now the fire had moved faster than anyone expected. It wasn't the arson he'd prepared for. It was a warning, a statement. Every second counted. Dean dropped the last few feet of driveway and skidded onto the lawn. The heat singed his jacket, smelled like death and betrayal. He ducked instinctively as a flaming shutter fell from the upper floor, clanging against the ground. "Gotta get inside," he gasped, every fiber of his being screaming against the impossible. "Gotta get the safe." He lunged toward the front door. The frame was warped, the wood charred and soft. He shoved with all his strength, and it groaned before giving way just enough for him to squeeze inside. Smoke clawed at his lungs immediately, a choking wall of heat and ash. Dean coughed, gasping, head spinning. He pressed a sleeve to his face and moved forward, knees weak, vision blurred by smoke and flickering orange light. Every step through the hallway was a gauntlet. Floorboards creaked, threatening to collapse beneath him. The familiar walls were now alien, distorted by heat. Photos of the family, Dean, Jordan, even some from the past, hung askew or already scorched black at the edges. He forced himself onward, shouting over the roar of flames. "Jordan, stay with me. I'm coming." Dean darted down the hallway, sidestepping a fallen beam. A section of ceiling collapsed just behind him, sending a wave of sparks and smoke into the air. He coughed violently, every breath a sharp sting, but he pushed through. The stairwell to Jordan's room loomed ahead. Heat roared from above, flames licking the walls. Dean ascended slowly, bracing against the railing, every movement deliberate. The steps beneath him groaned ominously. A window above reflected the firestorm outside, giving him a brief flash of reality. His home was dying piece by piece, and he was running headfirst into it. When he reached the landing, the bedroom door was partially blocked by debris. Dean didn't hesitate. He kicked with every ounce of strength, splintering the wood enough to squeeze through. Inside, the heat was unbearable, smoke thick, visibility nearly zero. His hands moved instinctively, searching, feeling over the floor, the bed, the desk. Where is it?" he gasped. Then, finally, cold metal against scorched wood. The fireproof safe. Dean dropped to his knees, fingers fumbling with the combination, which Jordan had shouted earlier in a voice he could still hear clearly in his head. The lock clicked open, and Dean yanked it free. It was heavy, solid, and warm from the heat that had already begun to creep around the edges of the room. The house groaned violently, a deep, primal sound. Dean didn't pause. He lifted the safe and started crawling back toward the door, dragging it over scorched carpet and hot splinters. Smoke stung his eyes. His chest felt like it would explode with every inhalation, but he didn't stop. A sudden crash shook the room. The ceiling had begun to give way above him. Debris rained down, splintered wood and hot plaster scattering across the floor. Dean shoved the safe ahead, ducking and rolling as shards hit him. His jacket caught fire, and he ripped it off, stomping at the flames instinctively. Pain lanced through his arms, but adrenaline drowned it out. The hallway was a furnace. Flames roared from the windows, flames licked the walls, and the floor beneath him threatened to collapse. Dean crawled, then stood briefly, staggering, clutching the safe as if it were a lifeline. Every step was agony, but he pressed forward, eyes watering, lungs burning, determination consuming him. Behind him, a section of ceiling exploded outward, sending a wall of fire down the hall. Dean dropped to his side, rolling under the heat, then scrambled to his feet, dragging the safe in a desperate arc toward the stairs. When he reached the front door, the outside world seemed impossibly distant. He shoved at the frame, and it gave just enough for him to heave the safe through. Flames nipped at his fingers, scorched his arms, and smoke clawed at his throat. Dean staggered backward, finally clearing the doorway, collapsing onto the lawn. The fireproof safe landed with a solid thud in front of him. He coughed violently, choking on smoke, shaking uncontrollably. The roar of the house was deafening, but outside there was air, freedom. And yet his body screamed in pain, burns on his arms, scratches along his face, a gash on his leg he hadn't noticed. Blood trickled, sticky and warm, mingling with soot. Dean barely moved. He lay there in the scorched grass, chest heaving, trembling, eyes fixed on the inferno consuming everything he had known. Flames erupted from the second floor, engulfing the bedroom, the kitchen, the living room. The explosion hit suddenly, a concussive blast as a gas line gave way. Dean was thrown forward, landing on his knees. Debris rained down, and the shockwave rocked the ground beneath him. Pain exploded through his body, but the safe was still there, clutched against his chest. He held it like it was a child, like it was everything that remained of the life they had been robbed of. Dean's throat ached. His lungs burned. His face was blackened with soot and streaked with blood. His jacket lay in ashes nearby. But he had the evidence. He lay there for a long moment, staring at the inferno, every muscle trembling, every nerve on fire. The house, the walls that held so many memories, the rooms that had been a prison for years, was gone. But in his arms, the fireproof safe was whole. The truth survived. Chapter 9, The Reckoning. Dean pulled into the motel parking lot, the safe still clutched tightly against his chest. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest, burns stinging, blood dripping down his arms, legs trembling from the adrenaline and the chaos he'd just survived. He swung open the car door before it was fully stopped, stumbling across the cracked asphalt. "Dad!" Jordan was waiting at the motel room door, half-packed bags abandoned at his feet. Relief flooded his eyes the moment he saw Dean. Dean collapsed into the doorway, dropping the safe onto the floor with a thud. "I got it," he rasped. Soot streaked his face, his shirt torn, blood matted along his sleeve. Jordan ran forward, grabbing Dean's arms. "You're alive." "Thank God," I thought. Dean shook his head, coughing violently. "No time for that. We have work to do." Inside, the room smelled like disinfectant and stale air, but it was safe. For now. Dean sank into a chair, and Jordan immediately began unpacking the laptop, cables, and backup drives. "They're gone," Jordan said, glancing toward the window. "For tonight, at least. But we can't wait any longer. We need the FBI." Dean nodded, still catching his breath. "Call them. Now." Jordan opened the laptop and tapped through encrypted channels he had already set up, using codes and hidden accounts they'd maintained for months. Within minutes, a secure connection blinked alive. "Agent," Jordan said into the microphone, "we have urgent evidence. Arson, poisoning, murder, financial crimes spanning decades." There was a pause. Then a voice, calm, professional, but tinged with surprise. "You're the Harises?" Dean leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "Yes, Dean Harris. This is my son, Jordan. You've been investigating Kirsten's family." The agent nodded. "For years. We've suspected them, but never had proof. If you have what I think you have." Dean held up the fireproof safe. "Everything that survives is right here." Over the next several hours, the motel room became a command center. Jordan shared the footage from the live cameras during the arson. Dean handed over the safe and its contents. They opened bags of hard drives, exposing spreadsheets of suspicious financial transfers, insurance claims, and offshore accounts. Pages of Paul Costello's original documents spread across the desk, handwritten contracts, altered medical forms, bank records. Dean's voice was hoarse, explaining the sequence of events. "We escaped the storage facility. We monitored every move. Vince Humphrey and Randall Piper, they're professionals, but we recorded them. Every step." Jordan added, "Mom and her mother orchestrated the poisonings. Every pill, every coffee, Dadmy, they manipulated us to stay dependent. I documented it for years, building a timeline, cross-referencing everything with their patterns." The agent typed furiously, questions firing. "And the victims?" Jordan took a breath. 17 confirmed. Over 30 years. Documents, recordings, survivor testimonies. This family's network isn't just Mom and her mother. They had accountants, doctors, enforcers, all complicit. They thought they were untouchable. Dean's hand shook as he spread the poison analysis on the desk. Tiny vials, color-coded, labeled with dates. "We had samples before they burned the house. Toxicology confirmed every attempt. They targeted me, Jordan, anyone who could expose them. The agent leaned back, stunned. If this holds up, arrests happen today. All of them. Dean exhaled sharply. It has to hold up. Lives are at stake. Jordan opened a notebook. Pages and pages of his observations, charts, hidden camera notes, dates, family trees. This is everything I've compiled. Since I was 8. Every time they thought I was helpless, I was recording, analyzing, cataloging. Dean added, voice low and determined. We have survivor statements. Neighbors, doctors who were bribed, friends of Paul Costello who noticed inconsistencies. All corroborating. The agent nodded. We'll mobilize immediately. Kirsten, her mother, the enforcers, anyone in their network. We have enough evidence to move on all counts. Dean felt a strange mix of relief and lingering fear. You understand, these people are ruthless. They've staged deaths before. They won't go quietly. They won't, the agent agreed. But with your evidence, they'll have nowhere to hide. Dean slumped back in his chair, finally letting himself breathe. He glanced at Jordan, who was exhausted but alert, still watching the laptop screen as more files decrypted. Dad, Jordan said softly, eyes tired but resolute. It's finally happening. They're going to pay for everything. Dean reached out, grabbing his son's shoulder. We made it through, Jordan. We made it count. Every sacrifice, every moment we suffered, it wasn't for nothing. The agent spoke again, calm but commanding. We'll need all physical evidence, every digital copy, every recording. Move quickly, and we'll coordinate arrests simultaneously. The network comes down today. Jordan looked over at Dean, a small, almost incredulous smile breaking through. After all this, today it ends. Dean nodded, feeling a swell of emotion he hadn't allowed himself in years. Anger, exhaustion, relief, justice all collided inside him. They thought they were untouchable. They were wrong. They worked in tandem, Dean moving piles of paperwork, Jordan handling encrypted drives, the agent guiding them step by step. The hours passed in a blur of typing, scanning, and verifying. Each revelation was heavier than the last, but each piece was crucial. Finally, the agent leaned back, eyes meeting Dean's. This is everything. We have enough for full arrests. Kirsten, her mother, the enforcers, accountants, doctors, every accomplice involved in murder, conspiracy, arson, and insurance fraud. Dean exhaled, the weight of months, years, decades finally beginning to lift. He looked at Jordan, whose face mirrored both fatigue and quiet triumph. Jordan whispered, "It's over. They can't touch anyone else." Dean nodded, eyes glistening. Not ever again. The agent packed up his gear. Arrests start immediately. Every target will be detained today. No one slips through this time. Dean leaned back in the chair, trembling, the fireproof safe still at his side. 17 victims, he muttered. 17 lives. We finally have justice. Jordan placed a hand on his father's arm. And now we survive. Together. Dean swallowed, nodding slowly. The night outside was quiet, but inside, the storm of truth had finally been unleashed. Arrests happened the same day. Kirsten, her mother, the enforcers, accountants, doctors, all charged with murder, conspiracy, arson, and insurance fraud. Chapter 10, After the Fire. The courthouse loomed like a monument to justice and memory, gray stone etched with the weight of centuries. But to Dean and Jordan, it felt impossibly small, almost fragile against the enormity of what had happened. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain from the night before, but Dean barely noticed. His mind was on the evidence, the victims, and the long months of tension that had brought them here. "Dad." Jordan's voice cut through the hum of the courthouse crowd. He stood slightly behind Dean, hands clenched at his sides. "Are we really ready for this?" Dean took a deep breath, resting a hand on his son's shoulder. "We don't get a choice, Jordan. We've already survived everything else. This is just finishing the story." Jordan nodded silently, eyes scanning the steps and the guards posted outside. He still looked small in the wide halls, but there was a strength there now, tempered by years of fear, deception, and survival. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Cameras from news outlets peeked around corners. reporters whispering into microphones, capturing every moment for a world that had only known fragments of the truth until now. Dean's hands felt clammy around the strap of his coat. The fireproof safe they had risked everything to save sat under the judge's bench, a silent guardian of evidence that had been more valuable than gold. The prosecutor called them forward first. Dean felt Jordan's hand brush his arm lightly, an anchor, a reminder that they were in this together. Mr. Harris, if you would approach, the attorney said, and the two moved as one toward the front of the courtroom. Dean could feel his heart hammering, but Jordan's presence steadied him, a quiet reassurance. The trial opened with the arson footage, still smoky and flickering, displayed on screens for everyone to see. Dean watched the faces in the courtroom, friends of victims, the families of those lost, even some former employees of Kirsten's who had been coerced into silence, all riveted. The images of flames consuming the Harris home were brutal, but necessary. They were evidence of intent, cruelty, and the lengths the family had gone to cover their crimes. Jordan took the stand next, though he was shielded from direct view. His testimony had been pre-recorded, carefully crafted to protect him from the attention, intimidation, and trauma of testifying in person. Dean watched the screen as his son's voice, steady, measured, precise, laid out every detail. The poisoning, the manipulation, the murders, the financial fraud. The courtroom listened, rapt, as Jordan detailed the family's methods, their network, and the years he had spent secretly documenting it all. Dean leaned back in his seat, the tension in his shoulders slowly easing as the prosecution displayed the financial records, insurance claims, and Paul Costello's original documents. Each piece of evidence layered on top of the other, undeniable, irrefutable. The defense tried to argue, emotionally, legally, frantically, but the proof was overwhelming. Dean felt a quiet satisfaction as witnesses corroborated every detail, from the small-town pharmacist who had noticed Kirsten's unusual requests to neighbors who remembered suspicious activities. The network was exposed in full, and the weight of the Harris's years of terror crashed down under the truth. Hours passed like minutes. The evidence of poisoning, of calculated manipulation, and of deliberate, multi-generational murder left the courtroom shaken. Dean noticed some of the jurors exchanging looks, eyes widening as the extent of the crimes became clear. Finally, after days of testimony, the verdict was read. Kirsten, cold, composed, but visibly tense, stood, handcuffed, as the judge's voice rang out. Life without the possibility of parole. Dean felt his knees go weak. Relief, exhaustion, and a strange, heavy triumph pressed against his chest. He looked at Jordan, whose fingers were entwined around his own, watching the screen silently. No tears, just a quiet, steady acknowledgement of survival. The rest of the family's accomplices, her mother, the enforcers, complicit doctors, accountants, were also sentenced, facing decades in prison for their roles. The family fortune, previously a shield for their crimes, was seized and distributed to victims, ensuring some restitution for the lives they had destroyed. Outside the courthouse, the sun broke through clouds, scattering shafts of light across the stone steps. Dean and Jordan stood together, letting the breeze wash over them, feeling the weight of justice finally settle. Jordan's voice was soft. "It's over, isn't it?" Dean pulled him close, hand over his shoulder, voice thick with emotion. "It's finally over." In the weeks that followed, life slowly began to repair itself. Jordan entered trauma therapy, learning to untangle the fear and manipulation from his memory, piece by piece. Each session was difficult, sometimes breaking him down, but always building him back stronger, more certain of his place in the world. Dean's body began to recover as well. The poison, long coursing through his system, gradually left, and the fog that had kept him weak and compliant for so many years began to lift. His hands, once trembling from constant fear, steadied. His mind cleared, sharp and alert for the first time in a decade. They moved carefully, first to a small apartment within walking distance of Jordan's school, then gradually reclaiming routines that had once felt impossible. Weekends became filled with walks, dinners they cooked together, and quiet evenings free of manipulation or fear. "Dad," Jordan said one night as they sat on the couch with takeout, "I think I can plan my own life now. College, friends, everything I wanted before." Dean smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "You've earned it, kid. Every bit of it." They rebuilt slowly, deliberately, honoring the memories of those lost and the lessons learned from years of survival. Every day became a victory. Every night, a chance to sleep without fear. The cycle of manipulation, murder, and greed was finally broken. No more hidden cameras, no more poison, no more shadowed threats lurking in the corners of their lives. Freedom finally was theirs. Dean sometimes glanced at the safe, now locked in a secure storage unit, knowing it had been a lifeline that had saved them and exposed the horrors they had endured. He would never open it casually. It was a reminder, a symbol of endurance and justice. Jordan, once silenced by fear, began to speak, to plan, to dream. School projects, friends, the small joys of normal life returned. Therapy helped, guidance helped, and Dean was there every step of the way, steady, unwavering, a partner in the reclamation of a stolen childhood. In quiet moments, they would sit together on the porch of their small new home, watching the sunset paint the sky with fire-like streaks, not the destruction they had survived, but the warmth and hope of life renewed. Dean finally let himself exhale a long, deep breath. "We survived," he whispered. Jordan leaned against him. "We survived, and we're free." The story didn't close on revenge, on rage, or bitterness. It closed on survival, on truth, and on freedom, the legacy Dean and Jordan would carry forward. Together, the fire had taken their home, but hadn't taken their lives. And it hadn't taken their future. They had survived, they had endured, and at last, they could finally begin again.